Okay, today is January 29th, 2024. This is Parshat Yitro. Yitro, very important Parsha because it's this Parsha that has the Ten Commandments. We're going to focus on a piece of that in a moment. But you recall that when we have studied this in the past, we made a lot of focus on God revealing and the scene at Sinai, and that's so important, such an important topic. I find just by way of beginning the parsha, themes and things of curiosity change from year to year. We can't always focus on the same things, and that's I think that's a healthy sign. A healthy sign is that we have new years and new questions and new things that we discover, new things that we focus on. Um, so I'm not going to focus on the whole idea of revelation. I find it just compelling enough to summarize it with a kind of mystery that is that the whole idea of the sign of revelation uh, implies that God wants to break through to humanity. I just love that idea that it's quite visual in my own imagination that we are, the world, humanity is like a sphere, a great sphere with a great membrane, and that God is apart from that. God is apart from matter uh, and not within. And these are very important, philosophical ideas, and that what Sinai represents is the attempt by that which is out there, God, which is, unknowable, to
Yeah.
become knowable in some way, to make um, God known to human beings, and that really is the whole goal here. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about uh, specifically the first commandment, and we'll see how we are trying to understand it. And I suppose we could start the conversation or start the lesson really, with the caveat that we start everything, which is it's impossible to condense everything into just a one single presentation, but we'll do our best. Um, let me just get warmed up here with the text, and we'll start with the text of Exodus 19, and just to set the mood. I didn't set it up in the normal table that I do. I just we're gonna, I'm just gonna run through this narrative and get us to the top of Sinai. So B'chodesh HaShlishi, on the third new moon, and this is a different translation. It's a breezy translation, the Contemporary Torah um, Jewish Publication Society. On the third new moon after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain. And Moses went up to God. God called them from the mountain, saying, Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. But you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. I've spent hours on these sentences. Ushmartem et briti v'item li skula mikolam. You will be treasured to me, kili kol haaretz. Vatem diulim mamlechet kohanim vegoy kadosh. You will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And this, in a sense, is the condensed version of the covenant. It's, this is what I did for you, and this is what I want you from me. I want from you to me. So Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all that God had commanded him. Vayanu chol ha'am yachdav vayomru. Kol asher diber Adonai naseh. All that those assembled answered as one, saying, all that God has spoken to us, we will do. Naaseh. Notice it's naaseh here and not naaseh v'yishma, but that's for another time. And Moses brought the people's words to God. And God said to Moses, I will come to you in a thick cloud in order that the people may hear when I speak with you, and so you trust you ever after. And Moses reported the people's words to God. And God said to Moses, go to the people and warn them to stay pure. Today and tomorrow, let them wash their clothes. Let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day, God will come down in the sight before all the people on Mount Sinai. And you shall set bounds for the people round about. Beware going up the mountain and touching the board of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. Without being touched or by being either stoned or shot, beast or person, trespasser shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they may go up to the mountain. Moses came down from the mountain to the people and warned the people to stay pure, and they washed their clothes. The people said, and he said to the people, be ready for the third day. To the men among you, you shall not go near a woman. On the third day, as morning dawned, there was thunder, there was lightning, and a dense cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud blast of the horn. All the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Now the Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for God had come down upon it in fire. Smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled violently. The blare of the horn grew louder and louder as Moses spoke. God answered him in thunder. And God came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And God called Moses to the top of the mountain. And Moses went up. And God said to Moses, go down, warn the people not to break through to God and gaze, lest many of them perish. The priests also who came near God must stay pure, lest God break out against them. But Moses said to God, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds about the mountain and sanctify it. So God said to them, go down and come back together with Aaron, but let not the priests or the people break through to come up to God. Let God break out against them. And Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. I'm going to stop there and just to remind us, okay, as we read those words, first of all, they're so evocative and they're so full with imagination for us that we're seeing a tremendous spectacle. The mountain is there's sound, there's light, there's quake, there's smoke, there's fire, there's all of this that is quite terrifying, and it's the terror of this moment that people are responding to, and we've discussed in previous classes how at this moment the people really they're too terrified to hear this, and they can't hear the content, and they don't want this, and there's a message in that too. The message in that too is that God is so powerful, so beyond anything imaginable, and yet God is trying to be accessible in some way to human beings. And this itself is a paradox, okay? That and this is part of the paradox that Moses discovers already at the burning bush. At the burning bush, it's the all-consuming fire that doesn't consume anything, and Moses from this gets the vision that God, which is so powerful and all-consuming, can also be somewhat contained and is accessible. And this is the kind of dilemma that is involved in the religious experience. The religious experience is, how do I connect to God, which is unknowable and all-powerful, and how does God, who is all-powerful and unknowable, connect to me? Okay, and in a fire. Go ahead, Nanette.
All right. So, wait, did I take it off? Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to take my take myself out of contemporary times and think like back then. But to me, it seems that God is going to a lot of trouble to make a whole big show of things with last week the part of the Red Sea, and now this, with the mountain and the smoke and the fire. It just seems to me that God is going to a lot of trouble to make a big show of things. Is it because he's so adamant about making the Israelites believe in him? Because if this is the case, it seems to me, if he's the big guy in charge, he could have taken them out of Egypt way before he did.
So I'm reacting only with the sense that, we project ourselves into the picture, and we, I'm going to say it in a kind way, which is that we see ourselves there, and therefore we see it with our own kinds of experience in the way that we understand experience. I've been quoting Carly Simon lately because of the way that people are interacting with the war in Gaza, and she sings the song "You're So Vain, you probably think the song is about you. You're so vain, you probably think the war is about you, right?" And Nanette, I'm not going to say you're so vain. I'm going to say we, all of us, we, contemporary human beings, we are so vain. We probably think this is about us, and that's a natural tendency. We want to see ourselves in the picture, and when we see ourselves in the picture, we're seeing ourselves in terms of the kinds of experiences that we have. Now, most of us really haven't had, experiences of tremendous awe and wonder. We have here and there maybe an intermittent experience, of a birth, or of, a great event in nature. The last time there was a hurricane or a storm, we definitely had this feeling of awe. We tend to react to things that are extraordinary in nature with that kind of reaction of awe. I don't want to say that this were more frequent in ancient times, but I want to say that because there was less clutter, right? There was less. I mean, the analogy is, um, you know, um, uh, I saw this movie yesterday, the movie about Amsterdam. It's called Occupied City, a very long, 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 long movie about the German occupation of Amsterdam. So there's one little item in there that they they cut power in Amsterdam at night, so there was no light. And so they said all of a sudden we could see the stars. So the best-selling books in Amsterdam during the occupation of Amsterdam by the Nazis was the books on astronomy, because all of a sudden people were interested in the stars because there was no light pollution. I mean, when was the last time, any of us really spent more than a half a second looking, at the stars and trying to really experience this? We don't, because there it it's hard for us to get into it because we don't have an unbarriered way of looking at the sky. Yeah, we could see the moon, we could see a few big stars, a few constellations, whatever, if we're lucky. But we don't really spend a lot of time on it because um, you know, there's too much light around. But when you go into the desert, or when you go, or if you don't have artificial light, you're going to notice that much more. And that's the point. I think ancient human beings, ancient civilizations may have been more attuned to certain phenomena in nature precisely because they had less to impede their interaction with it. So when God, speaks, as it were, or when there are these natural events, people react to them, and that's of course that's also a very human reaction. A human reaction is, I try to explain what is unexplainable by saying to God. We still have vestiges of that in our language, because a hurricane is an act of God or a great storm. This is in legal language, um, and the like. So um, we're we see ourselves in the text, and of course we should. But this text is speaking in a context to ancient human beings, to our ancestors, who who would react, I think, to a volcano in this way. Look, I didn't. I want to see the movie Oppenheimer, and I think many of you did, but I'm sure in the movie there's the reproduction of the great atomic explosions, right? And if you see that, I think you're liable to be kind of terrified by it. I don't know. Do you want anybody share their experience of seeing that here? Did you see that movie or no? No. Okay. Well, I've seen the video of some nuclear tests. They're terrifying. Okay. All right. So now I want to go ahead, Marlene. Yes.
My question is about the language. God seems to be speaking in third person and in first person, and then goes back to third person. Thoughts?
Well, the easy way out of this is say it's complicated. It's a complicated text, and it's going to go back and forth like this all the time, right? And that's the way the text becomes a text. But the interpreting this is to give you this exact experience, which is how do I convey what is out there, and how do I convey um, the sense of both intimacy that the text wants us to have here to experience, and transcendence, that God is beyond us, that we need to we are feeling the otherness that is far away. So the text is reflecting all of that for us, because God is in the third person, or the text is narrating this and also speaking directly. And so, I mean, if we went through it piece by piece, we could probably say, well, this is the point where God is saying to Moses, speak to the children, right? And then Moses is relating, this is what he said. That kind of thing is going on also. So it is a complicated narration. And, when you frame it out frame by frame, well, Moses is coming down, he's going back up, he's coming down, he's talking to the elders are, function on they're in a kind of intermediary. What does it mean to be in the top of the mountain? What does it mean to be in the bottom of the mountain? And all of these things. And even the stages of preparation that the Israelites have to take. They have to wash their clothes. They have to maintain a certain level of personal sanctity. We definitely had that line. Don't, for men, don't go near a woman, which probably tells you that this is part of the worldview of sexual purity. That is to say, everybody needs to be focused. You can't be nobody can engage in sexual intimacy during this time, and that obviously feeds a whole line of thinking about the relationship between these kinds of awesome spiritual experiences and really the body. How do you experience your body at the time, and what it means to be a human being, and what it means to be detached from aspects of your humanity, and that I think is part of this too. So we 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 don't have that kind of relationship with these ideas in the same way that our ancestors do, and the same way that this text probably was taught and transmitted uh, really throughout history. I mean, and right up until our own time. I mean, we do have sectors of our own community that understand and relate to the body in this way, um, and understand the categories of purity and impurity, in terms of their accessibility to divine messages also. All right, so let's just go on, and I'm going to just, I guess, for the sake of the full show here. We'll read the Ten Commandments, okay? But we're gonna focus really only at the beginning. So God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods beside me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above or in the earth below or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, your God, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of parents upon the children, upon the third and fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not swear falsely by the name of your God, for God will not clear anyone who swears falsely by God's name. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of your God. And you shall not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, male or female slave, your cattle, the stranger who is in your settlements. For 6 days God made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh day. Therefore God blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure on the land your God is signing to you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male, or female slave, or ox, or ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. And that is it. 10 Commandments. The people witnessed the thunder and lightning and the blare of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they fell back and they stood at a distance. You speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey. But let not God speak to us, lest we die. Moses answered the people, "Be not afraid, for God has come only in order to test you, in order that the fear of God may be ever with you, so that you not go astray." So the people were at a distance, while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. Okay, and that's where we'll stop. You know, I can't help but think this is the most important thing that God is ever going to say to the human beings. And what's the reaction? Oh, we can't take it. We can't take it. We can't take it. Just you do us a favor, Moses. You go up. You go and then you tell us, because it's too terrifying for us. And the there's a story. The story here. We love the story. The story is this relationship, the relationship between God and the people, and Moses in the middle of this relationship as leader, both representing the people to God and representing God to the people. It's an impossible situation to be in, and we have to appreciate it with all the pathos and with all. I think there's also humor and the terror of it, and the seriousness of it, and the demand that it is making on us. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to focus on the first commandment. I've given a course in the 10 Commandments, and I've stressed how little we appreciate the 10 Commandments. We like to say we live by the 10 Commandments and all that, but I start this course by saying we think we know them, and many of us think we know them. We could probably recite a few of them, maybe even all 10. But I doubt that we have memorized them in any serious way, and that we certainly know where to find them, and we certainly know how to read them, but interpreting them is quite difficult, and I think we have a certain hesitancy in our relationship with it. So I think for a modern Jew, the distance that emerges to the 10 Commandments is not, in a sense, only because it makes demands on you, but it puts God right front and center. Okay, and that's the first commandment. The first commandment is, "I am the Lord your God." I'm just wrong slide here. Just a second to get this up. Okay. I am the Lord your God, and this is what I'm going to do is I have a piece of this book on the Ten Commandments by Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager, important personality. Of course, a lot of people don't like him, but he happens to have a very, very fine book, a very brief book on the Ten Commandments, which I think is probably the clearest, most concise, and accessible interpretation of the Ten Commandments that at least I know of. And here it is, and I have it in my, I'm going to try and make this the full screen or not. Well, whatever. Let's do this way. Okay. What is the first of the Ten Commandments? Might seem like an odd question, but it's not. Jews and Christians give different answers. The reason is that what we know as the Ten Commandments is, in the original Hebrew, the Aseret HaDibrot, 10 commandments, 10 statements. And since the Hebrew is the original, we begin with the first statement, which all religions agree is, I'm the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay, that's the first statement. The statement is so important that none of the other commandments make sense without it. First, it asserts that God is giving these commandments, not Moses and not any other human being. Second, God is the one who delivered you from slavery. Again, no human being did this, not even Moses. Therefore, you have an obligation to me, God. And what is that obligation? That you live by the following 9 commandments. This is the beginning of what is known as ethical monotheism, the greatest world-changing innovation of the Hebrew Bible. It means 2 things. Ethical monotheism means that one God, that monotheism, is the source of ethics, of morality. Morality, an objective code of right and wrong, does not emanate from human opinion. It emanates from God, and therefore transcends human opinion. The other meaning of ethical monotheism is that what God most wants from us is that we treat other human beings morally. None of the 10 commandments concern what humans must do for God. Pre-10 commandments religions all believe that people must do a lot for their gods. For example, feed them and even sacrifice people to them. But now, thanks to the 10 commandments, mankind learned that what God wants is that we be good to our fellow human beings. Even though the commandments concerning not have false gods and not carrying God's name in vain are ultimately about morality. The thing we can do for God is to treat all his other children decently. Every parent can relate to this. Parents, or at least healthy parents, have an indescribable joy when they see their children act lovingly towards one another, and are incapable of incredible pain when they see their children hurt one another. So too God, who is likened to our Father in heaven, who cares most about how we treat other human beings, all of whom are his children. The third critical teaching of the first statement, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, is the importance and meaning of freedom. Know that God is not saying in his introduction to the 10 Commandments that he created the world. It surely would have made a lot of sense for God to introduce the 10 Commandments with the statement, I am the Lord your God who created the world. That is, after all, pretty impressive and would make sense. I created the world. You better listen to me. But no, the one thing God declares is that he took the children of Israel out of slavery and into freedom. That's how much God hates slavery, how important God considers freedom. The founders of America based their entire view of America on this belief that God wants us to be free. That is why the most iconic symbol of the American Revolution, the Liberty Bell, the only one sentence inscribed on it, a verse from the Hebrew Bible, proclaimed liberty throughout the land unto all inhabitants thereof. But there's one other equally important lesson about freedom imparted by the opening statement of the 10 Commandments, what freedom means. The giver of the 10 Commandments is, in effect, saying, I took you out of slavery and into freedom, and these 10 Commandments are the way to make a free society. You cannot be a free people if you do whatever you want. Freedom comes from moral self-control. There is no other way to achieve it. And fourth, finally, by telling us that he liberated the Hebrew slaves, God made clear that he cares deeply about human beings. It is impressive to create the world, but what most matters is not only that there is a creator, but that the creator cares about his creation. All of that is in the one statement with which the Ten Commandments begins. So, as I said, I think it's a very good and clear, concise interpretation of why it is that why is it that we have these commandments? Because God wants us to live by these commandments, and God cares. And why is it that God introduces the commandments in the way that He does, and what is embedded really in those first words, and even in the first word? Nanette, go ahead.
Okay. So listen, I just want to start by saying, as you know, I'm with you. I'm in the tribe. I believe in all this, but since we're just talking, it seems to me that God is pretty nasty. I mean, he's talking out two sides of his mouth. So on one hand, he was the one that put the people in Egypt. He was the one that kept them in slavery till he decided the time is right to take them out. So what I'm asking you, Rabbi Class, is like, why should the people believe in him if they really think about this? He's so nasty.
Well, it's the whole idea of how people believe and why people believe is an eternal question. I mean, I think it's a question that you don't have to stop at the experience of slavery. Throughout every person's life, and I would even assume even people gathered here, we have our moments where we say, we ask why are things, why is the world the way it is? Where, I think in the middle of a deeply terrifying and world-changing moment. We're in a challenging moment as a people for the 560 bereaved families of soldiers and the 1,200 families of people murdered. At some point, they in the excruciating pain that none of us really, in the sense of imagining what kind of terror and pain they're going through, they may want this question right in front of them, which is, how am I supposed to live this way in with God? And it's a very, very deep problem, a deep question. Um, so it doesn't surprise me that this is A, one response, and B, this is a possible response of the people. They want to know what it is. I mean, I'm going to say this in this way, which is, it's very nice for me to say God wants to break through to humanity. God is so big and powerful, blah 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 blah, and God, and that's one aspect of the human experience, which is to apprehend God as unknowable and all powerful, and that God is breaking through in this way. And another part of the human experience is exactly what you said, Annette, which is, we experience terrible things and we all suffer. And this suffering then, and if you put all the dots together, our experience of slavery was your design. So go figure that. So, there are irreconcilable things here, and there are unanswerable things here. And far from the cruelty that I could interpret from this, I also interpret the kind of thing that Dennis Prager is saying here, which is, look, you're human beings, and you live in a world of tremendous suffering and enslavement, and where you were victimized as slaves under human power, which is, until modernity, and possibly even in modernity, the worst thing that could happen to a human being. And I took you out of that. I gave you freedom. I gave you the best thing, right? And that is what that experience was about. The experience of slavery, as cruel as it was for Israel, was an experience that enabled Israel to have its apprehension of the most important aspect of humanity, which is freedom, to be free. And the most essential piece of information that is necessary for a human being to live, which is, and this is the contribution of the Bible, which is that human power over other humans is not the essence of what it means to be a human being. And that it's not the greatest human achievement to have power over others and to control others. The greatest human achievement is to be connected to God and to affirm that there's a power above all, and to be dedicated to a power above all human power, which, by the way, is at least one kind of convenient explanation to why all totalitarian despots hate Jews, because Jews are always saying, you're not the boss over me. You're not powerful. There's something more powerful than you. And that's very threatening to a despot. Ilana, go ahead. Unmute. You have to unmute. Press your space bar.
Why would the children of Israel want God to be their God? It's like it says, I'm your God. It's like isn't it like pushing himself?
That's the perfect question. It's a perfect question because it says they were ambivalent about it, and it took a long time, and it's the Jewish condition to be kind of, I don't want to say ambivalent or wrestling with God. It's the Jewish condition to ask and to be puzzled by this. It's, on the one hand, it's like, you chose us. Why did you choose us? And so, on the other hand, how could you, what an honor it is, what a privilege it is to be chosen for these things. It's the condition that we all live with, which is, we experience this, innately. Why can't we be like everybody else, right? On the other hand, would you want to be like everybody else? I'll give you, as Harif as the examples which I'm going to give you are like, every other country wages a war and nobody cares. Nobody cares, okay? Israel defends itself and gets brought up to the International Court of The Hague, okay? And is it, a cynic would say, and not even a cynic would say, why? What do we, what did we do to deserve this? The Syrians killed millions of people, genocide. This is nothing. Okay, the Chinese, the Russians, Ukrainian. Take your pick. Okay, and here, so we could say, that we really struggle with this, and yet on the other hand, we would say it in the same breath, we wouldn't have it any other way. At least I wouldn't. A person who's in the committed part of Jewish peoplehood, we say this is the price of Jewish peoplehood. And on the one hand, it comes with the whole world throwing filth at you, and on the other hand, you say, this is my honor, this is my privilege. My relationship with God then is also filled with difficulties and responsibilities and challenges and unanswerable questions, but it's also an honor. And that's embedded in the First Commandment. It's, I am the Lord your God. So on the one hand, and then you're not wrong for hearing, a very strong voice, and of course I could do the voice very well. I am the Lord your God. That's a strong baritone, bass, masculine, terrifying voice. And the people reacting and saying, we can't handle it. So you need to mediate that for us. So Moses is the mediator. So the people need to understand what it is, and it's nothing that you can fully understand. It's something that you always have to be reconciled with. Okay.
I just want to
Yeah.
add something. I do hear from young teenagers that it's the rebellious times of their lives
Yes.
sometimes, when they want something from their parents and the parents are saying no, disagreeing, ask you to bring me to this world. I didn't ask you to be my parents.
Right. I didn't make that choice. So and we could probably do this all in therapy. Okay. But the answer is when we get to a moment of maturity as human beings, we come to terms with this is who we are, right? And B, that we really wouldn't want to be anybody else. Okay. And that we, as I said, it's maturity. That means you come to it with a certain kind of health and not total breakdown, right? It's a struggle for many people to do that. Not every, is fortunate to have the best and parents in the world or whatever, or an upbringing without tragic outcomes. We all know that. So you come to terms with the fact that you are who you are, and that what you what you said was, I didn't ask to be brought into the world, right? And the answer is, of course you weren't, okay? But your job as a human being is not to rebel against coming into the world. Your job is to make peace with your existence in the world, and maturity, which hopefully you'll get to, young person, is where you understand that your parents really have the best intentions for you. That is, in 99% of the cases, right? And they're not abusive in 90% of the cases or whatever. They only want the best for you. And what they're doing is trying to shape you into the person that you become, whether you rebel against it or not. And that is a dynamic here. I think the insight here is that I mean, and Prager brought it out, it says God is acting in a sense as a lawgiver, but God is also asking as a parent. What does a parent want most from a parent's children? It's very simple. I want you all to get along, okay? I could tell you, as a parent of 4 children, I have no greater nachas than my kids getting along. I have no greater anguish when, whatever, there may be a disagreement. I mean, it never gets to anything, ridiculous, okay? But it's natural. It's just a natural thing. We want everybody to because it's pure joy. It's pure joy. Okay. Let me go on here and now point to, I'm just going to review what Prager said here. That God is the giver, not Moses. Not God is one, even though it's not a Shema statement, Anochi. It implies, God is one, because it's only one God talking. Anochi, I. God took you out of Egypt. Redeemed you from slavery, nobody else. And because of that, here are 9 more things for you to do. Okay. God cares about freedom. Note that God is not saying this in the introduction that he created the world. I think this is really important. It surely would have, this is just repeating what Prager said here. It would have been really impressive if God said, I created the world, but he's not saying that. He's saying, I took you out of slavery into freedom. Okay. And so it does make you think, if this is the first of the commandments, if this is the most important statement, this is what God is saying. This is my most important achievement. My most important achievement. I'm going to stop here for a second and say that what is driving this again is that God is saying my most important achievement is you. You're not creating you, but giving you freedom. Okay. And we as human beings are going to look at this and ask, well, what is our most important achievement? And that is a very fascinating. I could ask you all to give me a list of great human achievements. I just happened to, you can Google that for a second, and I'm just going to pull up a few examples of that here. Here is one set of examples in this over here. Just look on the left side, the wheel, the printing press, penicillin, compass, light bulb, telephone, combustion engines, etc. These are great human achievements. Okay, I'm going to just pull up another slide here for a second and get you to look at human achievements. Okay, and we could spend some time on this, but I'm just going to flow through this. Okay, human achievements: harnessing electricity, the written word, computer chips, agriculture, fire, vaccines, reaching the moon, math, scientific method, the internet, printing press, splitting the atom, literature, philosophy, relativity, empathy. Okay, and so those are tremendous achievements, and we could identify human beings really on the basis of that. And John, I see your hand just before we'll give that. I have to do one little thing that with just a touch of humor, okay, and that is, of course, hang on, stop it. Okay, that's the 2,000-year-old man. Just a second, we'll get to him in a second. Let me just make sure we can share the screen here, and he has interpretations of the greatest human achievements, and that's good for comic relief here. Here we go.
1,000 years you've lived, you've seen a lot of changes.
Well, here, can you hear? You able to hear? Yeah.
What is the biggest change you've seen?
In 2,000 years, the greatest thing mankind ever devised, I think, in my humble opinion, is saran wrap. Sandwich, you can look through it, you can touch it, and put it over your face and pull around and everything. It's so good and cute, you can wrap it up.
You equate this?
I love it. You can put 3 olives in it and put a little one. You can put 10 sandwiches in and make a big sandwich. Whatever you want, it's clean.
You equate this?
You can look right through it.
You equate this with man's discovery of space?
That was good.
Sir, we...
Yes.
Okay, so there, according to 2,000-year-old man, it's saran wrap, and he has another one where it's liquid pearl. The bit, and we get the point. The point is, human beings. That's all we do. We create achievements. Our task is to work in the world and to create things, and we aggrandize ourselves on the ability of our ability to make things. God aggrandizes himself on the ability to make people free, and that's the difference. John, go ahead, and then Bob.
Well, I have 2 questions. The first is God saying, "I am the only God." I don't think he's saying that. And the second is a little broader. You were saying that the whole framework of this is that God is transcendent and trying to break through, but we also are taught that God is immanent.
Yes.
And is that a thought that comes later in the Torah? They're both equally important.
Right. I think the "I am the only God," or "I am the God, you shall have no other gods beside me." There is a sense, we didn't even get to the second half of the sentence, which is, it's in a context. There is a context, and I think you bring out this issue correctly. It's a world in which people have lots of gods to choose from, and especially in the culture from which they are emerging, Egypt, where there's a pantheon of sorts, and in the culture where they're going in Canaan, where there's another pantheon, and certainly, the pantheon of the rest of the world. So scholars, and I have a book of scholarship here by this writer, David Noel Friedman. He has a whole chapter on this, on that whole idea. What is it about, God? And just it's you shall not make yourself an idol and all that stuff, which is the worship of other gods in ancient Israel. This is part of it. That there is a sense here that we are engaged in a polemic. So I put that off the table here, which is, that conversation is part of the Ten Commandments, in terms of how it revolutionizes ancient human beings. The second part of your question, just remind me again, was
And the idea that God is immanent as opposed to transcendent.
Right. So here, despite the scene of power, and it's good that we read through the rest of the commandments. So you get a sense that God is interested in your human relations. God, for example, the Sabbath, everybody has to rest on the Sabbath. Your children, your manservant, your maidservant, everybody, and your animals.
Except your wife, she's in there cooking.
It's interesting, so it's the I read this commandment and ask I think a similar question, which is, you could have everybody function as your servant on Shabbat. It's like, on Passover, some of the old Passover Haggadahs say the head of the table does this, right? And it's very hierarchical, okay? But the commandment really is not hierarchical at all. It puts everybody together. There is an equality in terms that nobody can claim that I have Sabbath and you don't, even the wife, okay? Not explicit, but it's the consequence of having everybody have a Sabbath means that your wife too. So the fact that the rest of the commandments entail all of the deepest human relationships, including you shall not covet, says that there's a certain immanence, that God is present in all of these relationships, that God has to manifest this, and that by affronting another human being, God is present in your life, and you are affronting God. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, does Dennis Prager have anything to say about the limits of freedom, and particularly the second utterance in terms of boundaries and limitations, and not just having other gods, but also not making a god of oneself? And I say this only because, and again, I think this is not from a mystical tradition, but some people say that the first commandment of being a giver and chesed is sort of representative of Abraham. And the second commandment, which sets up a type of din from Yitzhak, need to balance each other off. And so are there risks of sort of worshiping freedom above all else?
So freedom does come with responsibilities, and I think Prager would say that. I mean, we could go to the next chapter of the book in which he says, there's, why would he make, this a commandment? If God is important, what would be the next important? That there be no other gods besides God, and that you worship no other God. That the worst thing that a person can do is the worship of false gods, and that in the worship of false gods, you have really the potential for evil, because nothing is worse than a false god. And freedoms have limitations, that is to say, in terms of responsibility, and that's the shaping of a set of commandments around a human life is to enable that life to be a fulfilled life as possible. Look, we give a lot of analogies. My favorite analogy in on this topic would be, what is it about a stringed instrument? A stringed instrument consists of a string that you bind from one end to the other, and you can tighten it, and it creates a certain tone. The string by itself doesn't do anything; it doesn't vibrate. But the only way that the string can make music is if you tack it in on one end and coil it on another end, and then you pluck it. So by fascinating it, by restricting it, you enable it to give sound and music. The analogy is, by having a set of laws and responsibilities, that's the way that human beings who cherish freedom can truly be free. And this is, I think, part of what motivated me for this is, back a few weeks ago when we were talking about Shalach et ami v'yavduni, send my people so that they may serve me. So it occurred to me that there's an interesting theme here. It's, what does God want? God wants to take the people from the house of slavery, avadim, to become avadai, to become my servants. And it's when human beings are enslaved, they have no value and no dignity. But when human beings are servants of adim to God, they have total dignity and total worth. Okay? But there comes with one little catch: is you can't just do everything that you want. And that goes back to our parental analogy, which is, I want my kids to be free until they mess up my kitchen. You can't mess up my kitchen. You can't mess up your room. You can't just walk in the house with muddy feet, muddy shoes. There are rules here, right? In order to have a house where everybody loves each other, blah, 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 we have to have a set of rules. Otherwise, we have anarchy. Nothing, and that becomes, of course, the politics of it. We need a set of rules, because without a set of rules, we'll just destroy everything. Okay, that's where I was headed. But I want to just take you to one thing here. This is a lovely quote. When I was young, I admired clever people. Now that I'm old, I admire kind people. This is, what are the great human achievements? In the list of human achievements, what was interesting, that there was one that said empathy, that empathy is a human achievement. But Heschel here would argue the greatest human achievement, of course, is kindness, empathy, the ability to relate to it. And he was saying in this quote, which really can't tack down what the source of it is, he's saying, look, I admire all of human achievements. That's really impressive. But the most important human achievement is if you can get along with each other, if you can be kind to each other. I just want to do one thing, which is the Midrash, talks about the first word Anochi, okay? And here, I know, some of us like to dip into the pool of mysticism, and I appreciate that. And from time to time, I like to dip into Midrash. I've been enjoying it over the last couple of weeks, because it's given me a lot of insight in a way that normally don't, encounter for the preparation of this class. So Anochi actually is Notarikon. Notarikon means an abbreviation. Aleph Nun Chaf Yud. What does it stand for? Anna Nafshi Kitavit Yahavit. It's Aramaic. That already is ironic, right? God would be making a word, Anochi, to have an Aramaic acronym. It's the rabbis are playing with us a little bit. And he means as follows. And here's another one. Anna Amira Ni'ima Ktiva Yehiva. Or Yehiva, backwards. Yehiva Ketiva Ne'amanim Amaria. Rabbi Yochanan himself said, I myself wrote and gave. Anna Nafshi Ketivat Yehavit. Or Amira Ni'ima Ktiva Yehiva. A pleasant statement was written and given. Or backwards, it was written, it was given, its statements are faithful. Yehiva Ketiva Ne'amanim Amarecha. I put this up because it first of all, these are the kinds of things that are playful in the sense that for those of us who are inclined in kind of literally taking a chestnut and putting it in the nutcracker and cracking it open. So how many meanings can you get out of something? So that tells us one thing, that you can get at least three here. And I suppose if I spent some time on this and took a few shots of something that got you into a special place, I could come up with a few of my own words here for Aleph Nun Chaf Yud. It's not that difficult. What the rabbis are saying here on the surface are saying all of those things. These are statements that were written. These are sweet statements that are written, but they're also saying they really are. I think with these kinds of things and the variety of them, they're saying you, Elliot Mahomet, you, Steve Parkoff and Barb, you, John Abiada, you, Marley, everybody, you also have the license, you have the freedom, not only the freedom, you have the right to find your own meaning in that word. What does it mean to you? How are you going to interpret it? What is it, when the master of the universe says I, how do you respond to it? Or uses a word? And all of a sudden that's a conversation. And the rabbis came up with their own thing, but that to me doesn't limit it. That just says it's infinite. There's an infinite number, as many as there are people, and as many things that every person can define. Go ahead, Ilana.
If you change the vowels in Anochi, it becomes Enochi. Enochi means selfish.
Okay, so there you go. So there's a certain selfishness. That is to say, back to the comments earlier, which is that God does have a specific need here, and it's hard for us to deny that part of it. That God is a very needy God also. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I found studying this week was some discussions about why the story about Yitro preceded this section, which I found fascinating, in that as a convert, they were talking about the fact that the Israelites themselves were actually converts through accepting the 10 commandments, the 10 utterances and all that.
Yeah.
And the humility and sort of what was it about Yitro that is being role modeled? This is sort of an answer in part to Nanette's comment earlier as to why would the timing be such now? And it's a really very interesting discussion about the juxtaposition of that story here and then followed by the rest. I wondered if you had any thoughts on that as well.
So are they saying that that Yitro actually converted? Is that the line that
Well, he accepted Judaism after having sampled all the other religions and this and that, and hearing the stories that came. And why he had to hear it again was he had to hear Moses' take on the story rather than the news media's take on all this sort of stuff going on. So it's sort of like it's sort of a metaphor as an individual for what all of the people brought, and
okay,
not uniformity, but unity.
right. So on that line, I would the place that I would approach that is saying that what they're getting is a story, and that the people have a pre-Mount Sinai story, but Mount Sinai gives them their story, and that act, quote unquote, as a conversion is the acceptance of the story, right? I accept this as my central narrative. I heard this recently in a talk that was given by Yossi Klein Halevi, who's commenting on affairs in Israel. It was on the Times of Israel website, and he said as follows: the great thing about people who convert to Judaism is that they identify so strongly. It's they accept the story, and they say our ancestors, right? And when a convert says our ancestors, even the rabbis had a question about this. How can a convert say Elohei Avoteinu, God and God of our fathers, our ancestors? And the answer is, of course, because a convert to Judaism accepts the story and puts him or herself within the story, and that is what's essential here. And on the question of the people, I have, and we're over here, but one of the remarkable midrashim that is, and themes in midrashim about Mount Sinai, is that the people were one, and that there's the sense that the fractiousness of the people, is all difficult to deal with, but when they get to Sinai, they're one. Okay, and here it is. I'll just here. Why does it say Adonai Elohecha in singular? It says to teach us the eminence of Israel. Odi shivachan shel Yisrael. That when they all stood at Mount Sinai, shamdu kulan lifnei Har Sinai lekabel et Torah, to receive the Torah, hishvu kulan lev echad lekabel malchut Elohim b'simcha. They were all of one heart to receive the kingdom of heaven with joy. It's a remarkable statement. And then there's another statement that says, they were encamped, they journeyed, they encamped. Every time they journeyed in quarrel, encamped in quarrel. Here they were of one heart. Hishvu chulam lev echad. They were all one heart. So how do we deal with this? We are saying, here we are, where people were made up of different kind of tribes, different constellations, different clusters of ideas, opinions, and we all managed to, even with our fractiousness, be together. There is even that sense, that theme at the Exodus, in the splitting of the sea. We talked about it, me and my friends, last week, how there is a midrash where the people divided up into 4 different factions, and they were complaining about, should we go out? Should we not? Should we fight? Should we commit suicide? And they were fighting among each other about how to do this. And they all go together. And what's the point? The point is that they're all moving in their debate from point A to point B, and they're together. The fractiousness of the people is part of the character of the people, and yet there's a movement from one side of the sea to the other. They get there. Look, this is part of the great challenges that we experience as a Jewish people. We are a fractious people. How much more so now than ever. We have questions of destiny, about the people. I mean, yesterday I saw, there was this article about the group of, Knesset members and whatever, they're planning to go and settle in Gaza. I mean, you can't think of anything more ridiculous to have a conference on at this moment, and something as insane as that. On the other hand, not that it's not insane, it's insane, but it's an extremist position that is still part of Jewish peoplehood, and part of Jewish peoplehood is understanding that we have kooky extremes in the Jewish people. There's insanity, and that even with insanity, we are somehow moving ourselves through history. God forbid that it should erupt in any kind of dangerous way, and that, of course, is always going to be the tension. But the movement of people through history will still happen, we hope, as one people, despite its fractiousness, and that's the Lev Echad question at Sinai. Okay.